Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second of our webinars on unlocking the power of mentorship. My name is Joanne Pitt. I'm the Senior Policy Manager here at CIPFA, and I'm joined by our panelists, Andy Burns, Naomi Lucas, and Andrew Felton. So I'm really, really pleased and grateful for them that they have given up their time to spend a little bit of time with us, just talking about this specifically important topic. I mean, as all of you who are joining us will be aware, that it's a really challenging time for individuals in local government and particularly the finance community. This piece of work specifically came out of a research project that we did with the LGA in October of 2024 on workforce planning. And one of the things that highlighted to us at CIPFA was that there was a real challenge and need to ensure that those moving through their career path to a more senior position within the finance function were confident to do so, and specifically around moving from a senior position into that CFO position, because it's a very big move and it's something that's really challenging. So what we wanted to do was to make sure that people wanting to make that leap had all the tools in their toolbox, and what things we could think about, what could we do to support you to make that move and reach that CFO role. One of the things that we thought would be very, very useful is for everybody to understand the importance of mentoring and the mentorship scheme. Now, CIPFA run the mentorship scheme and the LGA run one, and Naomi will talk to you about theirs. But also there's mentorship schemes run throughout CIPFA within their regions. For example, West Midlands do a mentor scheme. Theirs isn't specifically for CFO or an aspiring CFOs. Theirs is throughout that career pathway. But it's really important that people are aware of this additional support. So I would just like to now introduce Andy Burns, who will talk you through his experience of mentorship and the perspectives of the mentor and the mentee. Now, Andy has been past president of CIPFA. He's also been a CFO at Staffordshire County Council for 12 years, and he's got a vast array of experience. And we're particularly delighted that he's come to speak to us today and share some of that experience. Andy, can I pass over to you?
Thanks, Jo. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm going to offer my perspectives on mentorship from a whole career spent as both a mentor and a mentee. I guess this sort of thing dates and ages me, but I've had mentors for my whole career, which is like 40 years. I started as a trainee accountant in Birmingham back in 1984, and I qualified in 1988, and I started mentoring in 1990. So I've got 40 years experience as a mentor and 35 years experience as a mentor, 40 years experience of being mentored. And just looking back on that, very, very fortunate. I think when I started as a trainee accountant in Birmingham back in the day, they had a mentoring scheme where all the trainee accountants had a mentor who was somebody who'd been newly qualified for a couple of years. And then once I qualified myself, after a couple of years, I guess I demonstrated sufficient, hopefully, capability and confidence that they trusted me to become a mentor to, again, trainees. And throughout my whole career, I've been both a mentor and been mentored. As a CFO, when I was, as Jo said, I was a Director of Finance and Resources at Staffordshire County Council. The route to there, and during that time, I've always had 2 or 3 external mentors. External is important. People outside the organisation. I'll say a bit more about why that's important a bit later on. And at any one time, I've usually mentored 3 or 4 people. Currently, in this phase of my career where I'm now doing some part-time advisory work and some roles as a non-exec director, I still have a mentor, somebody who's a senior non-exec director, and somebody who's also done some consultancy advisory. So still today, I get mentored, and I'm currently mentoring 4 CFOs on a regular basis and 2 people on a sort of ad hoc basis. And in addition, I mentor students at Aston Business School on the MBA program where I did my MBA. And I think being on both sides of that relationship, I think is really key. I think I'm a better mentor for being mentored myself, and vice versa. So what I want to do is, if Jeff, you can put up just the slide as an aid memoir for me, just to make sure I don't forget anything, but offer some perspectives, and then hopefully that will lead to some discussions later on in the Q&A. So in terms of the role of mentor in the first instance, now that's about supporting the mentee on their journey, their career journey, discovery about themselves and in their role, to offer knowledge and experience, provide advice and support, understand the various options and approaches around professional development, be an advisor or a sounding board when people are talking about issues, potentially be a role model, or show that the pathway they might be thinking about is achievable. And from a mentee's perspective, the role here, really important to understand that the mentee, it's your responsibility to drive the relationship. This is about pulling support from the mentor, not the mentor pushing the mentee. So it's the mentee's responsibility to arrange the meetings, to prepare for the meetings, to think about them in advance and what objectives they might have for those discussions, to reflect on them, and to hold yourself to account for it. So it's really important to understand that this is a mentee-led relationship, not a mentor-driven relationship. In terms of the skills required, I think these are mainly about listening, and mainly about active listening, about asking good questions. Some of you might have heard about the sort of the funnel technique of questions for mentors and coaches, and that's about asking different types of questions to try and understand issues and offer help, advice, and support. So open questions to try and encourage detailed responses and prompt thoughts and reflection. More probing questions to get under the surface of issues and explore them in more depth. Sometimes needing closed questions to actually get some clarity or clarification on a particular issue or an action. Some reflective questions just to try and make sure you understand the consequences or engage the impact. And sometimes comparative questions, comparing one course of action with another. So the mentor's key skill is about trying to ask good questions to help the mentee find their own answers with some prompting and some advice and support. And the key mentee skill is about active listening, which you can practice. It's about making a conscious effort to hear words and understand meaning, both in the mentee conversations, but also in the workplace too. And I'm sure we've all got experience of what people say, what people mean aren't always the same thing. So try to read between the lines and try and get under the skin of what people are really saying in those conversations. In terms of the benefits, and maybe I should have started with selling the benefits, but I think the benefits for the mentee, the person being mentored, help you make progress in your professional career, develop your skills, your knowledge, or your capability, to develop and enhance your networks, to help you solve problems, deal with tricky issues. Increasingly over the last few years, in terms of both my own experience and the experience of what I've mentioned to others, try and help people get a better work-life balance when you're trying to do a demanding job in difficult circumstances. Having some sense of work-life balance and tending to your own health and well-being is really important, and the mentor can be really helpful there. The benefits for the mentor, they develop your own listening and questioning skills. Something about giving something back. I've been fortunate to have really good mentors, and actually I do it myself because actually I benefited from that process. It's a really good way of actually discovering and sharing good new practice, and to gain insights and different perspectives from people at a different stage of their career. And it, no, frankly, it keeps you up to date with what's going on, and potentially keeps you younger. Most of the people I mentor are younger than me, significantly younger than me. So actually, it's quite good to keep you on your toes. Mentoring isn't coaching, it isn't counselling, nor is it therapy. Although a mentor might help a mentee access specialist support if it's needed, but it is about helping you find answers to your own questions. The key benefit as well, I think, is one about confidence. In my experience, usually people know what to do, but they want to test it with somebody else, and they want to make sure that the analysis they've undertaken, the course of action they're thinking about, the consequences of taking that action, is one that they want just some assurance and reassurance that actually they haven't missed anything. But building confidence in your decision making approach is also a really important benefit. And don't underestimate the importance of having some confidence to fulfill demanding roles like a CFO. Just onto some practical things. Now, it's about thinking about arranging the meetings in terms of their frequency, their location, their timing, whether they're in person or on Teams, etc. The confidential nature of discussions, and I'll say a bit more about confidentiality later on. At the first meeting, it's important that there's a chemistry between the mentor and mentee. Now, you might already know your mentor, you might not, and if you don't, there's something about having a conversation about how you've got to this sort of point. Now, each other's career journey, what sort of thing you want out of the conversation relationship. In thinking about maybe your development needs as somebody who's new to being mentored, you might want to think about some sort of SWOT analysis. Now, think about your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in your current role and for your career to help frame what an agenda might be for a mentoring conversation, and also have practical issues about contact between meetings. Now, in my experience, most of my mentoring relationships have been quarterly, 4 times a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, with sometimes ad hoc conversations between scheduled sessions. And that ad hoc can be, somebody's seen a job they're interested in, they want some advice about should they apply or help with their application process. They're dealing with a particularly tricky issue that might not fit within a scheduled timescale of more regular discussions. But those practical things need to be agreed mutually. It's also important, maybe after a while, just to review and evaluate how it's going. Maybe at the end of each year, the end of each cycle, what went well, what might be different next time, were objectives met? And maybe if they weren't, thinking about, might want to think about maybe setting some smart objectives about being specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. If maybe things hadn't delivered to mutual expectations, making some notes can be helpful, but this is not about documentation; it's about the conversation. I write things down because it helps me remember stuff and also helps me hold myself to account. But this is not about having some documentation; it's about a conversation primarily. Some of the challenges, some things that sometimes aren't always as easy as you might hope and expect. You might just not gel as a relationship, but that's no one's fault if that happens. And my advice there would be find a different mentor. Don't give up on mentoring. Don't give up on the mentorship. If for whatever reason it doesn't click between mentor and mentee, well, that's nobody's fault. That sometimes happens. Find somebody else. Sometimes a mentee's expectations might be unrealistic. Sometimes you might get drawn into line management issues, and very clear, a mentor relationship is not about an alternative line manager. A mentor might help a mentee think about handling your line manager, but actually it's not about replacing a line manager. That's really important. And the mentor also needs to be honest and say, actually, I can't help on that situation, or I can't advise because I haven't got that experience or that knowledge. But what they could do then in that situation is signpost you to somebody else who might be able to provide the advice and support they might not be able to. Just a couple of words about confidentiality and duty of care. And this is a question people often ask about when they're thinking about mentoring for the first time. It's crucial that the conversations are absolutely confidential, and there's a relationship basis on trust between mentor and mentee. Nothing goes outside the room unless there's agreement to do something. So sometimes a mentee has asked me to go and do something on their behalf, where they raise an issue which is confidential, but we'd never ever do that without agreement. That's really, really key. And then in terms of a duty of care, now this rarely happens, but in my experience has happened once in 40 years, so not frequent, but people do ask about this. As a mentor, you have a duty of care to your mentee, and that's about making sure it's safe. So when you meet, making sure it's in a safe place, and the information that you might share with somebody on a confidential basis, making sure that's safe. So if at any time your mentor feels that you are at risk as a result of what you share with them, either in your personal or professional life, they will take appropriate action to alert the appropriate authorities in the strictest confidence. For example, an HR department, professional body, health and wellbeing or service, so that they can help and support you appropriately and take action to protect you. The mentor will not breach that confidentiality you have in the mentoring session, as any action they take within the duty of care will be carried out on the understanding that the organisation you would raise it with would have a policy of confidentiality. And you would know what you're trying to do. If you are offering support based on duty of care to a mentee, you'd try to agree the course of action with the mentee. So sort of, I raise that because some people do ask about that. So I'll conclude with a couple of things. Firstly, some examples of the sort of conversations I've had as both mentor and mentee, and then offer some words of advice as takeaways for the future. So examples, as a mentee, who's been mentored myself, the sort of things I've talked to my mentors about are about dealing with difficult situations and trying to keep a sense of perspective and proportion when things aren't going well or going wrong. Sometimes ethical issues. You're being asked to do things that you don't feel professionally comfortable with. Advice about career development. Should I apply for this particular role or shouldn't I? What might the consequences be if I do or don't? Difficult political relationships, demanding or challenging bosses. They are rarely technical and financial issues. They're usually about relationships and dealing with difficult situations. They're rarely about technical financial issues. And frankly, I probably wouldn't be the best person to ask or answer a technical question. I might refer you to a technical expert as a mentor, but it's usually not about that. And as a mentor, the sort of things that people talk to me about are difficult political relationships, particularly if you're progressing through an organisation and you're exposed to members for the first time. Difficult professional relationships with peers or colleagues, tricky staffing issues, work-life balance is increasingly an issue, career development and stakeholder management. So they're the sort of things that tend to get talked about in mentoring conversations. So finally then, so I guess my advice would be both, be a mentor and be a mentee. Prepare for the conversations, create time to invest in yourself in both your mentoring and mentoring conversations. Chemistry is really important. You need to make sure you get on with or trust the person who you have that relationship with. If you're trying to find a mentor for the first time, maybe think about somebody who's been through a similar career journey as yourself. If you're a woman or somebody from a minority ethnic background, you might want to have a mentor who shares those life experiences and characteristics. And I absolutely get that. But sometimes you might want to have a mentor from a different background with a different set of perspectives. You need to be honest with yourself in the conversations that you have. And ideally, there should be somebody outside your organisation and definitely outside the line management arrangements. But it's not for everyone. It can take you outside your comfort zone, but it can help you get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to some discussions in the Q&A later on.
Thank you, Andy. It was really, really helpful. I think it's really interesting that you have both been a mentor and a mentee and are still continuing to do so in your current career. And I think that's it opens up that scope to understand that this is not just something you can do for just a couple of months, but something that you can really strengthen your career throughout its life. So I think that was really helpful. As Andy mentioned there is a Q&A. There's a little button at the bottom of your screen for you to add question and answers. So hopefully over the course of the next sort of 25 minutes or so, as our other guests speak as well, you will be able to think of a few questions that you'd like to put to everybody. There was a question in there, Andy, earlier, and then I think you answered it. So it just goes to show that it's definitely working, but they were asking about the type of role and how it could support them. So I think you answered that in full in your last couple of bullet points. The other thing I should have mentioned is that we're recording the session, which will go onto our YouTube channel. So SITFA's webinars are all allocated onto that YouTube channel so that you can watch them at your leisure if you want to watch them again, which is fantastic. And if perhaps you've thought it was really useful and somebody is talking about it, you can suggest that they also can watch it at a time that's convenient for them. So following from Andy's presentation about what a mentor might be, because it's really important. Obviously, we can't have mentees without mentors. There's two sides of the same coin. I'm now very, very delighted to pass to Andrew Felton, who is just going to share with us his experiences about being a mentee. Andrew has had a very successful career and is currently Director of Resource and Finances at Solihull. Welcome today, Andrew, and thank you very much for sharing some of your thoughts with us. And then we'll come to Naomi before we take any questions and answers. So please, as I said, please put some Q&As in the box as we go through.
Thanks, Joanne. So, Joanne said, Andy Felton, Director of Resources and 151 at Solihull for the last just over a year. Full disclosure, I've got a past relationship with Andy because I also worked at Staffordshire County Council for 25 years in finance and was an AD there, reporting to Andy for a period of time. So I had an earlier experience with Andy in terms of being line managed, and that was a sort of semi-mentoring role as well in terms of what happened there. And I find that really useful. And that was about 15 years ago, so it's going back a little while. I'd just like you to indulge me a little bit because I just wanted to talk a bit about the history, because actually I think that's quite important from my context in terms of getting into mentoring, being mentored at a later stage in my career. Earlier in my career, I'd relied a lot on line management and just people I came across within the organisation, people that worked with the organisation, rather than a formal mentor or coach. I had one experience of a coach sort of mid-career when I had a particular issue. I found that useful to resolve that issue, but I'm not personally, it doesn't work as well for me in terms of that side of things. And it was only as I progressed in my career that I got to a point where mentoring made sense and became something that actually was right for me at a point in time. So going back to Andy's point about, it depends on you and your context as to when it's right and what's right for you as you go through your career. So just that little bit of history then. So for the majority of my career at Staffordshire, I was in finance, came up as a trainee there, progressed into AD levels, supporting a range of things, got into transformation as well as finance. And then for the last 8 years, I moved out from under Andy into a pure transformation role, partly forced by some changes within the organisation, but actually spent 8 years then in transformation at Staffordshire County Council, so out of the core finance function, which was an interesting experience and did give me quite an interesting perspective of the wider organisation, given some of the work we did from a transformation perspective with the rest of the organisation. I left Staffs about 6 years ago, and that was after 25 years with the organisation. Sort of semi-engineered redundancy, probably shouldn't say that, but I did. And I'd sat at AD level for quite a long time on my career with Staffordshire. I got to AD level quite quickly, but then sat there, and that was mainly down to personal circumstances. I've got 3 kids. I wanted to see them grow up. So I sort of sat and was happy to sit for a period of time at that level within that organisation. However, I probably got a bit stale and stagnated towards the end of that time, which is why I was then looking for a move after that 25-year period. I then had a choice when I'd left Staffordshire whether to stick with transformation or jump back into finance. And that was a bit scary. I mean, spent 8 years out of finance whether you go back into finance at that point in time and whether you feel you've got enough experience still, you're up to date on things, is quite a big choice. And it took me about 7 months to find the right opportunity. I was fortunate with the payout I got, that, and my wife's circumstances, I was able to take that time. But I was fortunate then to secure what was effectively a finance director's job with Warwickshire County Council. It was Deputy Section 151. The full 151 was vested with the Executive Director for Resources, a gentleman called Rob Powell. And it was the mix of transformation and finance experience that actually had attracted them. But stepping into that role, there was a clear acknowledgement from both myself and Warwickshire that I'd got quite a rapid learning curve in terms of catching up on my financial experience. And stepping into that finance role, having been out of finance for 8 years, there was quite a big gap in terms of core knowledge. And whilst I've been doing CPD still from a finance perspective in the background, demonstrating that was still quite important. So actually there was an early conversation with Rob about, actually, would it be beneficial to have an external mentor that could help me regain some of that lost knowledge and get up to speed, think myself into the role, and think about the things that I needed to do within that, getting back into a core finance role, senior finance role, in order to fly in Warwickshire as an organisation. And that's what then led me to then starting to think about looking for a mentor at that point in time. And because I'd got an established relationship with Andy already, Andy Burns, and we were still in contact at that point in time, I approached Andy to see whether he would be my mentor on that basis, which I was very fortunate that he agreed to sort of take me on, and then we've been meeting quarterly ever since from that point of view. And I think what was important for me is that when I stepped into that, what was an AD at the role, but it became a Director of Finance role, there were a number of things about it which were new to me. So I'd got an expanded remit. I'd never managed things like the pension funds, and I've got a 2 billion Warwickshire pension fund now to lead effectively, even as Deputy 151, because that was delegated down a lot of the time to me in my role rather than the Executive Director of Resources. I hadn't managed Exchequer services before. I hadn't done social care financial assessments team before. I hadn't been responsible for things like specialist services like insurance. So there was a range of things that I hadn't done and hadn't managed, that actually it would be useful to have somebody that got that experience and could advise me about the things to look out for, the things to think about, how to approach those things. I'd also got issues around the fact that my senior, almost deputy in the finance function, who led the corporate finance team, had gone for the same role as me and not got that role, having been in the organisation for a very many number of years. She was very capable, very competent, but actually that was an interesting starting point in terms of managing that relationship and building that relationship from that starting point when she'd been unsuccessful and I had come in new and fresh to the organisation without having been in finance for 8 years. So that was a bit of a bitter pill for that individual to swallow initially. I never had a direct relationship with cabinet portfolio holders either, and I got a finance portfolio holder who was also the deputy leader to deal with. So actually starting to build that relationship. I'd worked with members before in Staffordshire, so I was familiar to operating in that environment, but I hadn't had a portfolio holder to sort of support and manage and get in the right place as well in terms of feeding the right information to them. So again, advice around that was important. And then finally, I was also fortunate that the Deputy 151 and Head of Finance was also, alongside the Monitoring Officer, a standing member of the senior leadership team. And actually, that was something new to me as well. I'd attended senior leadership teams in the context of presenting stuff from a transformation perspective and a finance perspective historically, but had never been a standing member. I wasn't a voting member because that was the core executive director and the chief exec, but actually myself and the monitoring officer were respected enough that we were there to advise and support CLT on an ongoing basis. So how to operate in that environment and deal with that environment when you're a sitting member of that forum, quite important. And there was a lot more exposure to core, to cabinet, to full council meetings, those sort of things, which again I hadn't routinely attended in my previous roles. So how to cope with all of that? Yes, I was getting support from Rob as my direct line manager, but Rob, interestingly, had only just qualified 3 or 4 years before that. He'd come quite late to local government finance and had done a fast track SIPFA qualification. So actually didn't have the depth of financial experience that I knew Andy had got, hence Andy being a really key person and an independent person that I could actually then start to have conversations with around some of the challenges, some of the issues, some of the scenarios I faced in terms of how I could approach those. And Andy got experience of those situations, and whilst yes, he good at listening, helping me think through those scenarios as a coach would, also having that relevant experience is then able to share that, give options, give ideas, give things to try that I could then put into practice and say, well, will that work for me? Is that right for my context? Actually, I can try a few of these things, and I did, to see whether that gave me an advantage, a way of building my credibility and my reputation within the council. And I had a really, really good 4 years. The culture of Warwickshire really fitted me well. I got on really well with the ethos and the values that they were driving. And as a consequence of Andy's coaching, the skills I'd built up over my career to that point in time anyway, the good support I got from my line manager, the feedback I got when I left just over a year ago was really positive in terms of the impact that I've been able to have in that organisation. And part of that was thanks to Andy being able to mentor me through some of those earlier issues, earlier challenges, getting my knowledge base up to speed, understanding and rapidly getting to grips with some of those services I hadn't managed before, dealing with some of those relationship challenges that were initially presented. Just having that private, independent, safe space to think through those things and get that advice from somebody that had been experienced and done those things before was just really valuable in terms of helping me really succeed and really sort of go to that next level in terms of that side of things. What also came out as the mentoring relationship developed over the 4 years I was at Warwickshire was as we moved away from the initial getting to grips, learning the organisation, establishing credibility and relationships, I'd sort of neglected my career thoughts prior to leaving Staffordshire just because of my focus on my family and my personal circumstances. So Andy helped me get back into thinking about where did I actually want to be from a career point of view. I decided quite early on in my career, having done a sit for fast track senior leadership thing, that I'm not sure I wanted to be a chief exec, because actually the demands on a chief exec and the type of person you need to be, I'm not sure whether I'm completely wired for that. Others might think I am, Andy might think I am, but I'm not sure whether I'm ready or want that yet. Certainly when I was talking to him through the Warwickshire experience, that wasn't the case. But certainly I got to the point where I was aspiring now for full director of resources type level, at the executive strategic director level rather than just the operational director level. So that helped me start to think through what is that next step? Where do I go next in terms of that journey? And Andy was really good in terms of coaching me through the things to think about, where to go and test the gaps that I got, what things I needed to start to think about developing and looking for opportunities as well, just to fill those gaps. And that enabled me then to speak to Rob about opportunities I might be able to access, things I could stick in various pies and activities across the organisation at Warwickshire to start to address some of those things that I knew the next employer at the next level would be looking for effectively. And just Andy's advice around that and guidance around sort of things to think about, and Rob's as well, were just really useful in that space effectively. And it also paid dividends then because Andy actually, full disclosure, was also involved from a technical and expert point of view in assessing the technical capabilities with the appointment of the current role I'm in, because Sitford Penn won that contract with Solihull, and pointed me in the direction. I wasn't actually looking to move from Warwickshire because, as I said, I was really happy with the culture of that organisation. But actually, and I wouldn't necessarily seen that opportunity as a result of that. But Andy knew, because the career conversations we'd had and where I was at, that it was exactly the right fit. This organisation was the role was the next step because it was director of resources. It was a full 151 rather than a deputy. Solihull's not a huge organisation. It's only 200 million, so it's a smaller council. So it's not like moving to a big county or a big unitary or a big city met organisation. It was a next logical progression for me career-wise, which I would have missed otherwise. And the breadth of expansion, because it was the director of resources role, actually was that next challenge that I needed at that point in time. So I applied for it, fortunate enough to get it in terms of impressing Solihull. What I didn't appreciate, and actually you might have thought at that point in time, well, job done, I've moved on, I've got that next step. Don't need a mentor then because everything's sorted and I just get on with it. Well, that expanded role provides a challenge. So going from finance to finance with HR, property, legal, all the other communications, corporate strategy, massive ICT, massively expanded remit. Getting your head around that is quite difficult when you've been used to being more involved at a detail level with the services you're working for. So actually, Andy was able to help me think through how to make that step up, to think more strategically and more across those services, and operate at a executive strategic director level than at the more operational director level when you're working with an individual service. Also, what I hadn't appreciated when I applied for and secured the job is the direction of travel Solihull was heading in terms of the difficult financial position it was arriving as a result of a range of factors that were happening for the council. And actually, those of you that may be listening may be aware that Solihull is one of the councils this year we've had to go for exceptional financial support, and we've been successful in getting it because of that difficult financial context that we have. Dealing with all of that in my first year as a full Section 151 and having the ultimate responsibility of that was quite daunting, and actually been quite stressful at times for me personally. It's probably been the most difficult year in my career, if I'm honest, over the last year, stepping into this role. It's also been probably the most rewarding in terms of some of the challenges, because I do like a challenge. But actually, Andy has helped me think through some of those issues. Very difficult relationships. We've got a good set of members, but actually very strongly opinionated leader of the council who works on the basis of a lot of assumption and opinion. It's hard to get him to sit down and listen to reality. Very politically driven and motivated by what the electorate will think around decisions. Has avoided some very difficult decisions because it's been fortunate to be able to do that. Having to take him down a route over the last year of not being able to have a choice around those difficult decisions has been challenging. The chief executive in Solihull used to do my job and had been doing that job for 15 years. Managing all of that and getting to grips with all of that, whilst your line manager is that person that used to do your job, is quite difficult. So having Andy as a mentor to help me think through that in an independent, safe space has been critical to me, mentally surviving and my welfare surviving over the last year, and thriving in that environment as well, to actually be able to get to a position where we've got a balanced MTFS for next year, and we've got a plan emerging now with some solidity about how we can try and regain our financial stability moving forward, and getting members positioned in a place where they now accept the fact that they've got to make some difficult decisions. They've still got to get over the parapet in terms of some of the things still left to do. But actually, Andy was quite instrumental in helping me get through that from a mentor point of view. Hand back to Joanne.
Thank you, Andrew. That was absolutely excellent, and I really appreciate all your candor on the challenges that you faced in your roles. But it's been really interesting to listen to your story and your career path, and how you've made those decisions, and how the relationship between mentor and mentee has been very supportive, particularly around some of those softer skills and transition, because your careers are a long while, and every part of that sort of career progression, there's always a new skill, something new you're inquiring, and how that relationship has helped you support your career journey. So thank you very much for that. When I sort of made the introduction right at the beginning, I also said one of our panelists is Naomi Lucas. So Naomi, if I can introduce you. Now, Naomi and I've worked very closely together on a piece of work about workforce planning in the finance department, in the finance function. It's about looking at the challenges around workforce planning within finance, and about how we can start to supply some of the sort of tools into the toolkit to improve the supply of finance professionals at all levels, but very specifically and importantly as well, those at a senior level, sort of aspiring into that CFO role. And we both see that this mentoring is one of those. It's not the only tool, of course it's not the only tool, but one of those tools that you can think about might be something for you. And hopefully the last two speakers have given you a flavour of the sort of thing that relationship might look like. But Naomi's just going to talk about the LGA scheme, because there's, as I said, there is a number of schemes that that are out there, and it's important that we are and make and generate awareness of all the schemes so that we can maximise the opportunity across the sector. Naomi, can I just pass over to you?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Joe said, the LGA and SITFA have been working quite closely together in this space about encouraging all finance professionals to continue to develop and to create the pipeline of future finance leaders. And we do feel that mentoring is an important aspect of that. As Joe said, there is a number of different mentoring schemes out there, local ones, regional ones, through SITFA. But the specific one that the LGA has been working on and promoting is targeted at chief finance officers and their deputies. It's been running for a couple of years now. So we've got it's been quite successful. In the past year, we've matched 20 mentors and mentees. But we are still looking for additional people that are interested in participating in the scheme, both mentors and mentees. If you are a chief finance officer, then yeah, I think as Andy said, there's benefits to being a mentor as well as being a mentee. So you're welcome to put yourself forward in either space. And if you're a deputy CFO and looking for that next sort of career path move and would like some support and help with that, then yeah, please register as a mentee. There are details available on our website, and I will put the email address in the chat if I can, so that you can contact us if you're interested. Just to say that we do make an effort to try and match people appropriately. So we'll look at what specifically you're after and the type of authority that you work in, for example, and see if we can and match you with someone that's got a similar background or skill set or experience, or has some of the skills that you're looking to develop yourself. So yeah, please do get in contact if you're interested in that scheme. Just to also mention that as part of that, we do offer some extra training and support. So obviously the webinar today has been really useful to hear people's experiences and how mentoring can work effectively. We've got a session lined up for next week, which is not a huge amount of notice, I appreciate, but next Thursday morning, which is an externally sort of facilitated training session for people that are interested in being mentors. So again, if anyone is interested in exploring this in a bit more depth and is available next Thursday morning, again, if you contact us via the LGA email address that I'll post, you are more than welcome to attend that, because we have got spaces available on that as well. So I think I'll probably leave it there, but thanks for the opportunity, and yeah, good to see a lot of people interested in mentoring. So thanks, Joe.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Naomi. Can I ask our panelists just to come back? Because we've got about 15 minutes when we can just explore a few of the challenges around the around mentoring and mentorship, and we can have a look at some of the questions. I suppose I'm going to take chair's prerogative. Andy, to Andy, so Andy Burns, can you sort of talk me through one of the it's sort of you've obviously experienced both sides of both being a mentor and a mentee. Can you talk me through one of the areas in your career when you felt it was really pivotal to have that mentor challenge to you, and what was the outcome?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Joe. You said too many Andys. Not unlike what Andy Felton just said. There was a point in my career where I thought I didn't want to be a finance director. I was what you would call these days a finance business partner at Birmingham City Council in the late 90s, and I'd gone for and didn't get a couple of jobs that I was expected to get. And I thought I needed to move organizations. But not only did I think I needed to move organizations, I needed to think about doing something different. So I did an MBA at Aston Business School because I thought I wanted to get into general strategic management rather than just finance. And I thought maybe I wanted to be a chief exec one day rather than a finance director. So I went started my MBA at Aston Business School, and my mentor at the time helped me think through the pros and cons of doing that, taking that sort of risk. And then when I come to the end of my MBA, which I was partly funded by Birmingham, partly funded by myself, partly funded by the Department of Health at the time, believe it or not, I went to Warwickshire to be an assistant director of social services, with responsible for the support functions like HR, IT, property, transport, etc. And again, that was a big step, and maybe an untypical step. And my mentor helped me think through the pros and cons of that. And actually, the decision I made to help me to make that shift was about what am I good at and what did I like doing. And the things I liked were breadth and variety. And I felt like in a finance role, I was being drawn into being a subject matter expert in depth. And in order to get the breadth that I craved or wanted, for that broader ambition for doing in a role non-finance, that seemed to be the right fit. What I found after a couple of years is I missed finance, and I ended up sort of going back into mainstream finance roles when I actually went to Walsall Council. But throughout that journey, in terms of testing my thinking about was this crazy or was this the right thing to do, and helping support me to ask the questions of myself to make sure I understood the reasons why, was a really, really valuable process. And I couldn't have done that without the mentors I had at the time. So it worked for me. And I guess that almost like, as well as having the experience at the start of my career with a mentor as a newly qualified accountant, which gave my first career sort of a bit of a sort of a head start, that process convinced me of the power of mentoring throughout your whole career. So it's never too late nor never too early to start. Would be another takeaway I would offer from it. But actually, there's an example there where basically, and it was somebody outside my organisation who helped me ask those questions of myself and make sure I understood the reasons why I was doing it, rather than just being attracted by this weird notion of I didn't want to be a finance director anymore. I was thinking about what was I gaining from it rather than what was I losing from it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's really important to see how that is impacted on your career, and obviously once that decision had been made, you've achieved an enormous amount of success, and you can see that from your career portfolio. Andrew, can I sort of come into and ask you a question? The work that SIPA had done on the workforce planning for finance functions that I was talking about and had done with the LGA earlier, so October of 24. One of the things we found from the research was that there is a reticence by senior finance staff across the public sector to step up into that CFO role. Now, there are a number of reasons that sit behind that, not least, it is recognised as an extremely challenging role, and one that can be also quite isolating. So can I sort of ask you what advice that you might give as sort of anybody in our audience that we've got as an aspiring CFO to make that choice, and how might they go about making that transition? It'll always be challenging, and so it should, but perhaps less daunting.
So I suppose the first thing to say before I answer the question is that it's a really interesting one, because my final year at Warwickshire, I was fortunate that Rob allowed me to attend a lot of the Society of County Treasurers activity, even though I was only Deputy 151, because usually the societies historically have been a little bit snobbish about whether it's full 151 or deputies, but I was fortunate that I was allowed in. And they started doing a deputies conference where deputies came along, and really interestingly, the one I attended, there were more people in the room that were scared of stepping up and not wanting to step up, that were deputies, that actually wanted to. So it is a rife issue, and we've had a further conversation now in part of Society of Municipal Treasurers with SITFA around that whole issue in terms of how we as 151s and the societies start to, and SITFA start to better support people with that, with understanding what the progression means, understanding how people can prepare themselves for that step up and role. Because I think it's that step up into the uncertainty that's part of the barrier, because what they see at the moment is the how difficult, as you say, that role is, the complexities you have to deal with, the challenges, the member dimensions, depending on your organisation, and the challenges that can bring with it, and that can be really off-putting. So people feeling they're equipped with the skills to deal with those things is the key thing to give you the confidence of going for it. So going back to what I said earlier in terms of that relationship with Andy Burns, helping me understand the gaps between the role I was in as a Deputy 151 or even as an AD and the requirements of a full 151 role or a full Director of Resources role was really important to get my head around. What do I need to do to build the resilience, to build the knowledge, to build the understanding of being able to make that next step? And then am I willing to take that step, knowing then what would be there waiting for me? So I think if you've got that support to make those decisions, understand that gap and where you sit relative to that. And there's a bit of soul searching as well in terms of whether you feel you've got the personal resilience to be able to make that step as well, because there is going to be a level of that you need. And if you're not wired in the right way with the right emotional intelligence, it can be quite challenging from that point of view. But I think if you've had the opportunity to explore all of that, had the support to develop the skills you need and that resilience, then I think you're in a much better place to be able to step up. But I think those people at the AD level, at the Deputy 151 level, need the support to be able to do that as well. It can't just be all down to them trying to source that themselves. So the mentoring program, whatever we do from a training perspective to prepare people for that, what the societies do to support people in terms of that progression by extending some of the activities they do beyond just the 151s, I think is really important in creating the right ecosystem for people to be able to make that step.
No, thank you. I think that's really important. I mean, it's interesting that you've talked about the deputy role and the deputy summit. We've SITFA itself has run a CFO summit for a number of years where we bring CFOs together. And this year, in fact, next month, we've been running our first deputy summit. So we're bringing together 50 aspiring deputies for exactly that role, so that we start to build up the sort of nationwide network and share those experiences. So that's really, really interesting. We can see that. We think we've just got one time for sort of one final question, which has come from the audience, which talks about finding a mentor is not always that easy. So i.e. people not working for large local authorities or civil service. There is an issue about where there are possibilities, and the organisation often has certain people in their sights, and for others the answer is not always appropriate. There are routes for individuals to break out of that trap and seek appropriate people with that experience. I suppose this is about trying to find a mentor. If I understand the question correctly, it's about trying to find a mentor that isn't necessarily in your sphere, where you want to experience something different, perhaps go into a slightly different organisation, and sort of look beyond your current career path. Andy, can I ask you if you've got any sort of
Sure,
last-minute thoughts on that?
It's a great question, and it's one that I've been asked before, because not everybody's in the situation that I was in, where there was a scheme ready-made or there was support ready-made in your organisation. But this is where the power of your networks are really, really really important. And actually, SIPFA is an outstanding example of a professional network. So if you're not involved or engaged within SIPFA, and you want to start the SIPFA networking opportunities in your region, contact SIPFA directly if you don't know about what they are and where they are. There might also be one of the great strengths if you're in local government is that people across the sector are very happy to share knowledge, information, advice and support. So in your local geography, if there's a neighbouring local authority or your area, there are likely to be similar groups. So, for example, in Staffordshire and Warwickshire, there were Warwickshire and Staffordshire finance directors groups, which included the chief execs the finance directors or the senior finance staff of counties and districts and police and fire. So either use your geographical networks of similar organisations, but in particular your professional network, especially for you might well be somebody who's ACCE qualified or CIMA, whatever, there are other networks too, but actually make connections with networks and that will hopefully give you a good chance to find somebody who might be offer advice and support.
Thank you. I mean, that's a really good place, I think, to finish this on. There are a huge amount of opportunities within SIPFA and other organisations to create those networks. If you want to find more volunteering opportunities from SIPFA, just put your note in the question and answer, and we can send you some of those opportunities for you to join boards or reference groups or all sorts of things that we ask for volunteers for. So it's a great way to expand those networks. It just leaves me to say a thank you to all my panelists. That's Andy, Andrew and Naomi for sharing their experience and their time with us today. We've recorded this webinar, so it will be and go on to our YouTube channel. So hopefully you've enjoyed it and you can suggest that others might want to view it on that channel that's more convenient. If you need to know anything else about mentoring, please drop us a line. We'll be very happy to fill any gaps that you still or questions that you still might have. And thank you all very, very much for listening. And I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you.